Hello, and welcome to Exploring Axon, a podcast where we discuss Axon and its ecosystem. I am your host and Axonic developer advocate, Sarah Torrey. In this episode, I spoke with Adam Dymitruk, who came up with the concept of event modeling. This is currently one of my really favorite topics because I really appreciate the thought process behind it in terms of organization, design, but most importantly, the simplicity of this concept that it introduces this level of design into somewhat of a detail, but also very understandable for every department and every team in a business, which I think is really cool. I also really enjoy talking with him because as we are living in different times now with the current global situation we're going through, we have different experiences with working from home, with children, other interruptions in our lives. And I really appreciated sharing some of that during our recording session with Adam and how wonderfully he handled the situation as well, because, he's also a parent and we just had a really, really fun conversation. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And let's have a listen. Hi, Adam. How are you today?
Good. How's it going, Sarah?
Great. Thank you so much for joining me. I understand it's late evening your time and it's pre-dawn my time. So it's dark on both sides, which is
I'm a night owl, so that's okay.
that's great. And I'm more of the early bird, so it works out great.
Perfect time
And
zones for that.
yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So, Adam, I have so many questions for you today, and so many topics to talk about. So hopefully we can keep it at a reasonable time. We'll try that. If not, we'll talk again.
Yes.
But before we go to one of my currently favorite topics, which is event modeling, let's talk a little bit about you. Can you tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, education? Where are you located, by the way?
Sure. Yeah, I'm located in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada on the west coast. So, very beautiful place to live. I'm happy to call it home. I'm originally from Poland, so we were immigrants here when I was a young kid, and that's kind of what started my computer journey is going into and getting a Commodore 64 when I was a little kid, and I started
Nice.
programming at a very young age and got really into it.
Yeah.
I was kind of my friend. I was kind of a nerd. So yeah, that's how I
That's
started. So
that's
a lot
perfect.
of it is self-learned.
Yeah, wonderful. So I'm currently actually closer to your home country than you are. So it's
Yeah,
perfect.
it's,
Yeah,
the
wonderful.
irony.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. And so you told me a little bit about how your interest started in computer and programming. How about your education and you know
Well, that
after moving to Canada?
yeah, it followed naturally. Luckily,
Hmm.
here in the '80s, the at least the late '80s, you already had some computers in schools
Yeah.
for kids. So there was
Yes.
by the time I was in grade 7, there was some Commodore 64s
Hmm.
already. In high school, they did get a lab with a computer lab where you could do word processing on PS2s and
Nice.
things like that, and actually start to do some networking
Hmm.
and things like that. So, every time there was a computer course offered, I took it. I took them one grade ahead. The
Yeah.
teachers let me do that, which was nice. And actually, I started consulting before I finished high school, simply
Wow.
because
Okay.
people needed help with computers. There was a lot of
Yeah.
digitization back then, so you had
Hmm.
people wanting to automate stuff, and the principal had a friend in government that needed an office automated, and that was my first contract back when I was 17 or something, or 18. That was
Wow.
which was, yeah, really cool.
Amazing. Yeah.
So I stuck with it and finished up college right after. I started with
Hmm.
engineering, but that didn't have enough of the computer courses,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
I was kind of very, very pointed towards an engineering degree where I didn't get a chance to take all the math courses I wanted and all the computer
Right.
science courses. So after the
Hmm.
first year, I decided to just follow my passion and take the courses that I liked instead of
Yeah.
the courses that you're required to take by a certain degree. And
Smart.
so I got a
Yeah.
general degree in so it's called an Associate of Science, not very popular in
Hmm.
Canada, but offered
Yeah.
quite commonly in the United States.
Yeah.
Luckily, the college I was going to offered that as well. And by the end of this podcast, we'll see how that how I actually came back to academia after all these years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
talk
And I
about
can't
that a
wait to
little
hear
bit.
about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's my education. Is no formal, large, giant, impressive degree, but just a college degree, which was fine, and a lot of hands-on
Mhm.
dedication and spending lots of time on the computer till 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
to the disappointment of my parents as to why I was late for school every morning.
And I think that's a really smart decision because nowadays I personally see a lot more people who are moving from whatever formal education they had to computer or technology and things like that, and that's really nice to see because we see that. Those things are offered more and more online or even in colleges, and so you don't have to have that formal education, such as myself. My education
Oh,
background is in music, and here I am.
I
So
tell
yeah,
you, if I had,
it's a smart decision.
if I had what my son has at his disposal to learn whatever you want,
Hmm.
it's an amazing world. I remember having to wait for a good computer book to be back in the library because it was always checked out by somebody, and it
Yeah.
was you'd wait months to get the book that you needed. So it's very frustrating. You had kids and people that wanted to learn,
Hmm.
and I don't think people grasp just how far away that used to be a couple of
Yeah.
generations ago.
Yeah.
And wow, I'm getting old. I'm saying couple of generations ago now. Anyway,
You and your mouth. Yes, yes. No, I totally get it. And it's, you mentioned that, and it reminds me when I first took my very first computer class, which was in 1995. And my dad actually was the person who was like, "Yeah, let's do this," because my brother and I were constantly on the computer and playing Prince of Persia.
oh, that's a
That should
great
tell you
game.
how old I am.
Oh yeah.
It was interesting because that particular course or class or whatever you want to call it was offered once a week, and there were only 4 kids in that little classroom. And it was on DOS programming, so we just sat
Yeah.
there and
Oh,
just
yeah,
basically
yeah.
terminal stuff. But it was fantastic, but at the same time, kind of sad because that the interest wasn't as much as it is, of course, nowadays. And so that class was unfortunately canceled after like however many months it was. But
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, I hear you on the availability of the information and also the interest and everything. But yeah, it's great to see that that has changed, and now we have books for little kids. Like my 4-year-old has books written by one of my friends who does children's book on technology. It's a fascinating world. It's wonderful. But anyways, let's get back to you.
Sure.
So we can talk for hours, can't we?
Yeah.
So let's talk about event modeling, because that's something that you started with that concept, which is a really really cool concept. It's nothing. I don't think it's not this like new age idea. It was built on event sourcing and so forth. But the way that you've come up with the idea is really fascinating. So I'm really eager to hear more about it. How did you come up with the idea?
Well, like, it's really hard to come up with a truly original idea. So, kind of like you've hinted, you kind of build on concepts that you find in your experience or through research or
Mhm.
experimentation or whatever, and then you kind of put together something new that's more usable. So, if you talk about information system design, most people think of UML or something like that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
how come UML is not as prolific as just not doing UML?
Yeah. Right.
It ended up being a little bit too heavy, and I always
Mhm.
liken it to the fact that it's just too close. It's too one to one with the actual implementation,
Right.
which does draw a silo within an organization and doesn't reach as
Mhm.
many people, and therefore it
Mhm.
won't be as successful. So the further a concept can reach, the more successful it'll be if it has value. So
Absolutely.
the ideas, actually, I never set out to make event modeling. It was really just the way that I learned how to design systems after
Mhm.
I spent a year talking with Greg Young, who came up with CKRS and event sourcing. That was in
Mhm.
2008. He lived here in Vancouver for a couple of years, maybe 3 years.
Hmm.
and moved on to Montreal after that. But
Yeah.
during the time here, that's when he coined the term CQRS, and
Hmm.
I was lucky enough to actually have him as a mentor in how to think
Hmm.
about information systems in a different way. And this is
Hmm.
from the accounting perspective of really understanding an audit trail of all events that we really kind of want to
Yeah.
be at the heart of how a database works, which is the transaction log. Well, what if the transaction log itself was what we were able to query and use as a immutable store that continually grows? And
Hmm.
so thinking about that and seeing just the advantages of being able to specify software, test software, think about information and information systems. I a lot of times don't want to talk about programming or software. I want to talk about
Yeah.
information systems because the
Yeah.
same concepts actually extend into manual processes or
Hmm.
workflow, just business workflow.
Exactly.
And all of these concepts, it's just information. So if we focus on information itself, we
Hmm.
start to see a deeper understanding and something that's more usable by everyone else. And so
Yeah.
that's, I think, the refinement that I gave. It's borrowed from a couple of places. Like I said, Greg Young's event sourcing was key to kind of say, well, this is the storyline. These are events going from left to right that describe what's happening in a system, and we can, if we do that correctly,
Hmm.
we'll understand, and we can use that as the modeling practice.
Definitely.
Um, the idea to have it as a workshop format where
Hmm.
it's a collaborative process with lots of different people from different roles within the organization participating together, being able to get
Hmm.
their ideas across in a way that doesn't require any large amount of learning, then
Hmm.
we have something that's very valuable. And so that was borrowed from Alberto Brandolini, who did event storming. In fact, we thought
Hmm.
we were doing event storming, and when I
Yeah.
went to Alberto Brandolini's event storming um, summit that he had in 2018, it
Yeah.
was very quickly apparent that what we were doing is not event storming at all.
Yeah.
The only thing that we had in common really was commands and events,
Hmm.
but back then there was really no timeline, or at least the strict timeline that event
Hmm.
modeling imposes,
Hmm.
and many other aspects. Uh, I focused on keeping a simple model
Hmm.
for representing software with fewer moving parts. Event storming had a bunch of other stickies that
Hmm.
are used, so we'll get into that later. But
Yeah.
essentially, what we're looking at is the influence of being able to design software via stories, which is what Greg Young was doing
Yeah.
when he was specifying long-running workflows and
Hmm.
just in general event-sourced systems.
Yeah.
The specifications were elaborated with using events on a timeline. That was a very, very strict kind of way of thinking about things.
Yeah.
He's all about consistency and having global ordering as far as it
Hmm.
can go to make sure that systems are performant, predictable,
Yeah.
etc. So that was his
Yeah.
discipline.
And it's
Um,
really great that you mentioned that earlier, that you were thinking about a whole business as opposed to just talking about
that's right.
software architecture and things like that. Because one of the things that was really intriguing to me when I first started looking more into event modeling and find out all of the benefits of it was that simplicity, as you mentioned, is key. And also, we're looking at a business as a whole, so that all
Hmm.
aspects of this business are basically having a voice into this modeling of whatever product or system we're trying to design. Because
Hmm.
having that simplicity really helps people to understand better what this product is going to be like, or what they want this project to do later on. And that's one of the things that I want to get into and talk a little bit about. You mentioned the storyline and
Yep,
having things consistent. We first usually start by designing those events, and events are in the past tense. And the reason why we do that is because we want to see what the end product is going to be like, right?
that's right.
As humans, we're always looking in past tense. We're looking at, okay, so if I'm going on vacation, I would have liked to see the sea, or I would like to have this
Hmm.
thing working a certain way, or
Yeah, you have a
whatever we're
vision
looking
for
at, we
what
have a
your
vision.
vacation is going to have been
Exactly.
like, right? You're kind of
So then,
building your memories before you actually make them. Yeah.
exactly. So we have that really powerful ability in our brains to do that. And so looking at it that way, it makes perfect sense, because you kind of work your way backwards and say, okay, so how do I get to this end point that I want to get to? And I think that's what you've done with event modeling and the storylines and swim lanes that we will come back and talk to a little bit more. So let's talk about one of the things that you mentioned in your blog, which I absolutely recommend everybody to read, because it's really comprehensive and also very simple to read. It's really
Thank you.
nice. Yeah. So thank you for making it really easy to digest. One of the things that you mentioned is that event modeling uses three moving parts, four patterns based on two ideas. So let's delve a little bit deeper into that. Let's talk about
Yeah.
the two patterns that you and I were talking via email over the past few days, kind of dissecting all of this. So I'll give you the floor. So yeah,
Yeah, it's nice to think about a very predictable and small number of patterns and pieces, and I think that to tie this together with the last point as to where event modeling came from, one of the things that was missing was the UI UX perspective. So one of the
exactly.
things that I always had with the event model and how I specified software was to make sure that the screens were there with example data
Mhm.
to show what was actually appearing in front of people's eyes, even if it's some back end process, what was appearing on monitoring screens
Yeah,
for a sysadmin. It doesn't matter. There's a visual representation to that storyline, and
exactly.
event modeling really is kind of the storyboard for a movie. You could
Hmm.
see it like that. And the different plot that you have, twisting plot threads down below, are kind of the patterns that you see in musical notes. So when you
Yeah.
look at an event model, there's a lot of parallels between other things that we already have as industry standards in other in other industries.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely, just to tie that up. So getting the event streams and the storyline in an event model definitely came from Greg. The collaboration from Alberto and the usability. Obviously, there's a ton of books on usability, but I wasn't influenced by really any specific person on that approach. I just
Hmm.
needed a customer first focus, and so adding the UI as a first class citizen was key.
Yeah.
UI and UX both. You basically see what the cognitive load is, and you
Hmm.
see the visuals. You can say that this is what they're seeing via email or
Yeah.
via the web app versus the mobile app. So it's really in tune with what the experience is. So that kind of ties the three core influences of what shaped event modeling
Hmm.
to be what it is today.
And I think that's a really
And
important concept, because as developers, a lot of times we don't think about the user.
that's
A
right.
lot of times we don't think about what the user is going to experience, and so that kind of a lot of times comes at the very end process. Whereas we want
Hmm.
it to be at the beginning of the process, because we
Yeah.
want to be aware of what is this person who's using my system is going to experience. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really really
Exactly.
important concept. Yeah.
And it's a first class citizen. So at the
Hmm.
very top of the diagram, it's the first thing you see. You have swim lanes
Exactly.
representing each user that's interfacing with the system. In the
Hmm.
hotel system, might be the manager, the guest, or
Yeah.
maybe a couple of guests if they're competing for availability of rooms. You might want to
Yes.
show that.
Hmm.
You might even you probably have the cleaning staff on there too. So you have about
Yeah.
three, four, maybe five swim lanes dedicated to specific people that are the actors in your movie,
Yes.
that you're going to explain how they're going to be interacting together through
Right.
exercising all the different parts of the system that you
Hmm.
have, the
Hmm.
company you're running, and so yeah, definitely that's one of the key components. So yeah, let's get to the components of that. We can talk
Absolutely.
about, you talked about the first two patterns. Well, first, the areas are kind of interesting of an event modeling diagram, or an event model, which you get from event modeling, is that we already covered the top one, which is, what screens do people see
Yeah.
as time moves forward. So there's the timeline is the most important at the center, and a timeline is just an arrow that goes from left to right, and you
Yes.
you basically have things only moving forward through time, so it's realistic. And
Yeah.
above that timeline, you have the swim lanes that represent what the screens are showing
Hmm.
for each user of the system. So
Right.
usually at the left, you have people registering, you have some setup that
Hmm.
admins might do, and by the time you get to the very end, you might be looking at sales, and you might be looking at getting comments about the user experience that you might get after your stay at a hotel or whatever
Yes.
service you used. So you can see there's some sort of definitely some overall kind of neat patterns that emerge. They're not really design patterns, but kind of see the tendency that when you specify software, you can really see some order to it. And so the first thing is really the top part, which are the swim lanes for the different UI pieces that people see. And at the very bottom are different swim lanes.
Yeah.
They're the swim lanes that contain what happened in the system for different types of events. Let's say there was anything to do with payments, we might put in one swim lane. So we might have refunds,
Yes.
discounts applied, payment processed.
Mm-hmm.
And in a hotel system, I'll keep using that example because it's the one that you'll find on the website.
Yes.
You might have a reservation system that keeps inventory of how many types of rooms there are. You might have specific rooms listed, another one for cleaning schedules. So that might be another swim lane. Anything to do with the cleaning staff might be in that system. So it's a very natural way for people to organize that. And you show those again with these yellow or orange stickies. I choose yellow simply because yellow stickies are more easily found in stores than orange ones. I know by convention people just know that events are usually orange, but I'm not gonna make it any harder for people. Usually people have yellow stickies found in their desk. So if you want to do this, just on your whiteboard, it's kind of fun to be able to move them around physically and do that as a group if you can do that. So those are the two major swim lane areas, the UI UX at the top, and then at the bottom are the events, which really are the things that mark transactions or state changes, I would say, like someone registered for a hotel room. Well, you now know that that's a fact and it happened at this point on the timeline. And then you can make your own conclusions as to when 10 of those happened. You probably ran out of the rooms because you have added initially, 10 rooms.
Yes.
So you can derive from the events that have happened what the state of the system is. And so the two other colors that we have, actually, we only have the UI doesn't have a color. It's whatever you want. It's white, usually wireframes, but it is, we can call it as a white to be color, or just black and white wireframes or whatever. But below we have the yellow events. In the middle, it's the actual blue, and I want to get to that part before we talk about the first pattern, because it involves how we change the system and how we view the system. So event modeling says that let's not talk about input output. Those are kind of a leading loaded terms, because input output systems means that if I need to get some output out of the system, I need to poke it and get input. And sometimes you'll have queries for state being commands, and you'll have some weird ways of looking at CKRS and event sourcing if you think about it that way. So I tend to like to use the words everything around state, because what the event model is as you're looking at these swim lanes and how these different elements appear on it as you move left from right, it's really about, at any point in time, if you draw a vertical line through that event model, you can agree that the system is in a certain type of state. So if we want to know how many rooms are available, well, you can just look to the left of that line and count up all the reservations and all the check-in events and say, well, looking at the history of what has happened, it looks like we have 2 rooms left.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how you get the
view.
That would be the state view, and we represent those with green stickies. And where those stickies really belong is in between the two areas of the swim lane. So right in the middle, it's kind of like the meat and the sandwich between the two. Yeah. And so I like the green stickies, and I'll get to the blue ones, to be in one row, really in between, to mark input and output to the system. It's kind of like the boundary to your system, where you can denote input and output of the information. So how you think of state is really by connecting some of those events to a green sticky, and perhaps it's a sticky that shows how many rooms are available, like I said. So you would join any relevant events that happened before to that green sticky to show that this is what this particular view represents. It's it's not interested in payment events. It's not interested in people registering as users. Those are not interesting to that view. So this is kind of like a model, really, one specific model that's going to address availability. Now, on the other one, you have the blue stickies, which are how you affect the system. So that's you want to affect the state of the system. How do you change the state of the system? How do those yellow stickies appear, yellow or orange? Again, if you're looking at the if you look at the article, there's still orange there, but in practicality,
whatever your market is available.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like
So let's just call them yellow or orange.
yeah, perfect.
So how do they get in there? Well, that's generally you press a button on the screen, something like after filling out your form, you hit the register button,
Mm-hmm.
and what you can imagine that just sends a command to the system. I command the system to register me as a user, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that I know that I can do other things later,
Right.
and so. You connect the UI straight to this blue sticky in that middle part of the event model, and then connect that one to a subsequent yellow or orange sticky down below in one of the
Mm-hmm.
swim lanes
Mm-hmm.
that marks that as a success.
Yeah.
And so that's great. So we now have inputs and outputs.
Mm-hmm.
Those green stickies, by the way, can then go be linked to a screen going the
Yes.
other way as
Mm-hmm.
output to
Yeah.
show some information that may help make the system informative for people, because it's really this kind of cadence that you start to see out of a lot of the systems, and it may have different beats. If you're familiar with music, you'll
Mm-hmm.
understand that
Yes.
can be different waves of information flow.
Yep.
Some of them are direct and immediate, so that you input something on a form, you press a button, and then immediately you see the effect of that,
Mm-hmm.
which would be
Exactly.
through a green sticky
Mm-hmm.
that would be updated by the thing you just did,
Yeah.
going all the way down to this orange sticky down below, and it'll bubble up to the next page with that information.
Yep.
And that will have perhaps that what you just submitted will be mixed in and calculated along with already other pieces of information in the system, but then it'll give you a new view. Perhaps it would be a total on your, if you're going to Amazon or something
Mm-hmm.
and you put in a coupon code, you want to see how it affected the price. So that's kind of like
Exactly.
that. Affect the system, see the effects, make your decision on what to do next, affect the system again, see what effects it has. So there's
Mm-hmm.
this nice little back and forth that you have,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be immediate. Like some of these things are longer. Looking at reports, weekly
Mm-hmm.
sales reports, looking at you're subscribed to something, getting informed
Yeah.
via an email that the item that you're interested in
Mm-hmm.
is available, or it might be the room you're interested in, the type of room became available if you're talking about the hotel system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this nice cadence that you get about affecting the system, seeing its effects, then using that information to make your next decision, dive back in and act with the system again. So
Yeah.
it really does form a nice for a set of patterns to talk about usability, UX, UI components with
Mm-hmm.
designers. So that crosses that boundary quite nicely. And so when you talk about, so we kind of went over the core pieces
Yeah.
of the event model. That's actually quite complete. And in fact, that middle part of the sandwich that I talked about with the blue and the green,
Mm-hmm.
if you really want to go fast and you just want to use a paper napkin over lunch and discuss something, skip those parts, because a lot of times the events and the commands are one to one,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes most of the time the green stickies are one to one with the information on the actual screen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can go quite fast by moving those out, but that's not always the case. And if you
Mm-hmm.
want to be thorough, it's good to have them in there. It's also a better visual analysis as to just how complex the system is, because we have a very good sort of cadence that you can get into as to what your velocity is when you're actually implementing these
Yeah.
systems. They tend to have really good anchors around these blue and green and green stickies. You can just
Absolutely.
count them up
Yeah.
and really use that as a good way to estimate how much the next system you're going to write is going to take with your particular team.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
if I can add that this system is really actually helpful, and I'm glad you brought up the visual aspect of it, because for me as a person who was not very familiar with CQRS, several months ago, it was very difficult to visualize that and see, okay, so where is the command, where is the event, where is the input output,
Hmm.
what changes the state,
Yeah.
what is the view of the state, all that. And I think what really got me interested in event modeling in the first place was that I'm a visual person, so I have to look at something to really understand it. And looking at it
Hmm.
was just like angels singing, like, oh no, it makes sense, I can see it. And
Yeah.
you can really, with the colors that you explained also, we can literally see what are the commands, what are the events, what can be the queries, right? And the way
Hmm.
that you mentioned also, it really is helpful, because the input, for instance, when we talk about the hotel application, for instance, if you want to register an account, if I'm a customer and wants to register an account to book a room in this hotel, I can go ahead and send the command to register my account, and that command is sent, and the event then will be account registered, and you can book your room, and then in the query side of it, you can see, okay, there's room availability, or on the management side of it, you can say, okay, so these rooms are available for cleaning or what have you. So
Hmm.
visually it's actually really pleasing to the eyes, and I like to think I'm an organized person, so this actually really satisfies that craving that I had to understand exactly what CQRS is, because you
Hmm.
can see it in time, and you can actually make sense of your inputs and outputs, and literally what changes the state and what can just give you a view of the state, which I think are really, really valuable, to
Hmm.
anybody really, for that matter.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
these are what you call the moving parts, right? Because you can,
Yes.
of course, in time change them, modify them, improve them in the future, based on what your
Hmm.
system is trying to do, or if you want to then add something else. Like, for instance, this particular part of the hotel application that we're talking about, we're focusing on the booking part of the application. So then later on, if you want to bring in third party systems to, for instance, manage your payments or your inventory, whatever, which I'd like to uh, go a little bit into more detail with you as well, because you do talk about translation and also automation, and those are really important
Yeah. The
parts
different
too.
patterns within these little moving things. Yeah.
Exactly. So let's get
Hmm.
into it right away. Yeah.
Yeah, so the next step is, okay, we have these, we kind of have the pieces. We have
Hmm.
some of the rules as to where they go, but now we have some rules as to how they connect.
Exactly.
And so there are some rules about what you can connect and when you can't connect.
Right.
And that seems kind of limiting, but it actually isn't.
Hmm.
It adds a little bit of rigor, but because you're limiting what can connect to what, you're limiting the proliferation of what I call pattern soup. And if you ever
Mm.
try to design software with UML or read the Gang of Four book
Hmm.
about all the different design patterns, your head will be spinning,
Yeah.
and it's just I liken it to I keep using this analogy that it's if you're into nuclear physics, it's kind of like the
Right.
earlier 20th century where they had the subatomic particle soup. They
Hmm.
kept making these experiments and they found all these different particles. And at one point, there was like 150 of them. Like, there's got to be like a deeper meaning, right?
Yeah.
Just like we saw snowflakes. Every snowflake's different.
Yeah.
There's got to be a different meaning. Well, that's all ice and it's all made out of one water molecule. So we
Mm.
wanted that deeper understanding of what is kind of like the minimal thing that's still useful to talk about. And
Yeah.
so what we have here is kind of, the core thing that makes up these larger patterns, and that is focusing on that state. So how do we specify something? If we take one vertical sort of little slice, or we look at one of these blue commands, how do we specify all the permutations of that? Well, it's
Hmm.
this kind of given when then situation that you can say, given these previous events have happened, when I try this command, then it succeeds and I have this event.
Hmm.
That's a really easy test to talk about, to
Absolutely.
implement, to really give a scenario. And I can run through, to give some data variations, some permutations of different data values. I can have maybe 10 to 20 of these for some of the more involved steps,
Yeah.
or they can be simple success and failures for the very boring mundane ones, such as
Hmm.
registration. That's not at the core of your your system, and that's fine.
Yeah.
For So that's the first pattern, is really about state affecting state. So
Hmm.
state change or input is the first pattern. The second pattern is state view, obviously,
Right.
and these are the two main patterns. They're very similar because the state view is really given when then without the command. So it's a
Right.
given then because you can't reject state. It is what it is. So
Yeah.
you can say, given that I've had these events happen to my system, all I can do is make a conclusion in my test and say, then this report or this screen or this view will look like this.
Hmm.
It could be a sales report. It could be your current basket. It could be how your reservation amount owing or whatever it could
Hmm.
be. It's basically information that you're going to use or other systems are going to use. We can get into the next patterns, which is cross system.
Yeah.
But the main two patterns really are these given when thens and given thens. And the
Hmm.
following two patterns are really built on those two patterns when you're implementing a system like this.
Hmm.
But for the sake of simplicity, the event model does make them a little bit shorter. And so the next pattern we have is getting information from an external system. So the example that I give in the article is the hotel has a an automatic checkout system, so that on your last day of that you're staying there, if your GPS coordinates on your phone are outside of the grounds of the hotel, the hotel will automatically check you out and send you an invoice and all this kind of stuff. So, maybe that's not a realistic case, but it's good enough to show that we're using external events and how to automate them. So it's called a translation pattern, which means that I'm going to learn, I'm going to specify how I'm going to think about something that's not native to my domain and translate it to something that is. Because the events that we're getting from the phone are really not human friendly, at least to say the least. They're a bunch of coordinates that are these digits, and they're coming in, once a second, or however often it is, might be every 10 seconds. But holy smokes, that's a lot of events. But when we're talking about the business case for this, and we're talking about the specifications for this, we're not talking about coordinates to one another. We're using words such as, when the person leaves the hotel grounds, they will have an invoice sent. So there's, how do these events that make sense, such as left the hotel grounds, make it into the system? Well, it's through translation. And so the initial events might be, well, let's define the rectangle or whatever geographic shape we want in terms of coordinates on a map as to what the grounds are. And then our translator, quote unquote, is going to then only give us events when something of interest happens, such as when I leave or I come back to the hotel. And so those are the events that we can then use for further specifications. But translation is really how you integrate input from an external system. And usually that's given, hey, I got these coordinates. Therefore, on the other side, so given these coordinate events, then I get, this subset of events that I understand on this side. So that's a very, very quick way to specify that kind of system, that kind of system interaction. And the fourth one is obviously the opposite of that. Notice this is system to system. So the fourth one is about how we get our information to another, going the other way. And a good example of that is like automating a payment gateway. We certainly don't use that language that the payment gateway API gives us. That's really alien to us. So you have a translation going on the other way. But we don't call it a translation. This pattern is called an automation. And the best way to represent that across all sorts of different information systems is through what's called a to-do list. And so again, one element we didn't mention is that sometimes on those UX UI screens, we put a little gear or a little robot up there because we represent automated pieces such as payment gateway processing and things like that. Usually easily by technical people thought of as batch processes of the olden days, but these can be real-time reactive patterns in implementation. It's really a separate thing from implementation. But that's about it. Those four patterns are really it. And the last one is kind of specified that given this to-do list, which is a green sticky, then I'm going to send this command for each entry, and if those are successful, these are the events that we'll store as a result of them, and then it just goes back into the same patterns. And that's the importance, and that's why you can only have a command link to an event and an event link in turn to a green sticky. So that's how you ensure that things always follow those small patterns, is that you can't just say, given this event, I'm going to make this command. No. You have to sort of think about it as this will still be thought of as a to-do list in some way, even if it's one-to-one, even if you're doing very little. That cadence is quite important to have a set of regular patterns to follow, so that your software development is predictable. If you're using it for software development anyway. Definitely. And I know we're running low on time here, so
I'm fully enjoying this conversation. No. This is great. And actually, this circles us back to the main idea that you mentioned at the beginning, which is the simplicity, because we want to keep everything digestible, if you would, right? Because otherwise
Yes.
everything becomes too big and too giant. And that actually brings me to the couple of last points that I want to talk about more in the terms of the event modeling. Then I do have some other general questions for you. Um,
Sure.
so that would be translating then this model into code then becomes a lot easier, because if you are using event sourcing and if you're following the patterns of CQRS, then you can actually see, okay, these are my events, these are my commands, these are what I want to have available in queries, and so forth. That's one of the really beautiful things to me, because it actually translates this model really easily into code. And as a developer, you
Hmm.
want to be able to see that, but also as somebody who's non-technical, you want to also have a say in how your system is
That's
going
right.
to work. Like, for instance, maybe the CEO of the company or the marketing team, they're not technical people, but they also have very important things to say about this business. And also your developers should also have that understanding of what's going on with the system, so that they can translate it easily into their code or designing their system or what have you. So that's one of the things that I wanted to point out, that is really beautiful and wonderful to me. And also the last point is the cost per adding a feature, because I think that's really
Hmm.
important, and something that sometimes we don't uh, think about immediately at the beginning when we're designing a system or an application, is that
Right.
if you want to then add to it, what is the cost effect of it? Can you talk about that a
Hmm.
little bit?
Yeah, there's two aspects to that. There's the way that traditionally we would make agile projects in sprints, and that we get kind of rework being added because we're constantly refactoring what we have to be better.
Hmm.
On the surface, that sounds really good, but really what we're doing is violating a lot of open close
Hmm.
principle, and we're really making projects become less and less fun as the further they get on,
Right.
which is really those, oh, wow, you're so lucky you're working on a greenfield project. And, that greenfield project quickly turns to something nasty, a year or two later,
Hmm.
where getting features added, just it's like pulling teeth. It's really risky, and it's not good. And a lot of that is really due to the amount of rework that's being done, and how we eliminate rework and kind of destroying things we built before. Because we didn't have information about what the complete system was going to have,
Hmm.
is this design up front, which we touched upon
Yeah.
earlier with UML.
Hmm.
So hopefully you've seen that this has the same effects of having a design such as a UML design to guide your
Hmm.
implementation, but it's not a big design up front. It's a small design up front. And we always gave that lip, we said that we're going to do that in Agile, but we never really did it.
Hmm.
I've been involved in Agile for, 2 decades,
Hmm.
from the days of XP before Agile even started.
Yeah.
And we never really did that properly. There was never a really good way to do it. Certainly wasn't done in a collaborative manner with multiple people. A lot of this ended up being in just the programming realm, and that bridge between business and tech was hardly there, and it really cost us. So having small design up front that is done collaboratively is incredibly
Yeah.
important. It's not something esoteric that's like UML that has to be done by
Hmm.
technicians, and it's not really so far away from implementation that user stories still leave so many unanswered
Yeah.
questions about the actual form of how the information is going to change over time, and give you that cadence that'll give you estimates.
Hmm.
So that's really where we're at, is we have this small design up front, and done in a friendly way that invites any person from any role in the organization to participate and have their say and understand the system. And then once the design is done, just like a building blueprint,
Hmm.
when the building is finished, you don't throw away the blueprint. You still
Yeah.
keep the blueprint for maintenance, or if you want to add an extension to your house,
Hmm.
you need to know where the electrical is, where the plumbing is. You need to know all those things. So the blueprint turns into a map where you can find things. And the same thing with an event model. After the project is done, the event model sticks
Yeah.
around even after implementation, so that during maintenance or plans for extension, you can look and see just what that'll cost
Hmm.
and how you would do it,
Yeah.
and do it in an inviting manner that doesn't really form any elitist teams
Hmm.
that have the knowledge to do it. I pretty much explained everything there is about event modeling in this
Yeah.
podcast. So you don't want to have to force your company to study books for a whole year to get on the same page, because that'll never happen. You
Yeah.
want something that you can explain more or less within 15 minutes, half an hour, and then really learn how to collaborate
Mm-hmm.
using that, instead of having to just wait for people to learn read a bunch of books. That's really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
So we want, simple concepts that are very powerful and give a lot of value,
Mm-hmm.
and that are not esoteric to a specific group of
Yeah.
people. You want it to be highly inclusive,
Mm-hmm.
and then to give this cadence where you can implement these slices in variety of technologies. So we're really looking at, yeah, our company ends up working in fixed cost,
Mm-hmm.
because we have such a good cadence that we can rely on these estimates so well.
Yeah.
And fixed costs open up a whole bunch of other doors
Mm-hmm.
where you don't really need to have such high scrutiny interviews, which removes the subjectivity,
Mm-hmm.
drives up diversity. You really don't have to worry about who you're hiring, because they end up getting paid like anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Those terms as to what people get paid per slice
Yeah.
can be quite open,
Yeah.
because everyone's getting the same. And so it really removes a lot of these nasty kind of patterns that we've developed in this industry, that's kind of been at the forefront of news for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it's going to be a lot more positive for a lot of non-technical reasons as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention that because as we talked a little bit earlier during this talk, this conversation was a lot of people from non-technical backgrounds are coming into the world of technology, and I think it's really important for somebody like me to have this concept that's really easily understandable and it's not overly technical, because I can read a very technical blog, but I have to, read through it 10 times to be able to make sense of it. But with a concept like event modeling, it makes it so just wonderful. And it's not to diminish the complexity of it at all, because it's still a very complex idea, and but it's put in a way that is simply understandable, and that's what I
Yeah,
really love
exactly.
about it. So I really appreciate your efforts in doing so, because it makes life so much easier for me, at least, hopefully for everybody else too. But just we did talk a little bit about,
I'm
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. I'm sure there's a few places we're gonna have to edit out anyway, so I think we're good on time
Yeah.
from my perspective.
No, it's perfect. So let's we did talk about academia earlier in oh, I guess the kids are up. So
Uh-huh.
we did talk about academia a little bit earlier on, and
Hmm.
I can't wait to hear a little bit more about hello 2 year old.
How cute.
Uh, we're not going to edit anything in this episode. It's
That's
so
good.
much
That's
fun
good. Keep it
happening.
real.
Exactly.
I like it.
You know, as working parents, especially in these weird times,
Yeah,
this is what we deal
exactly.
with,
Yeah,
and I love it. But anyways, let's go back to academia. You did talk to me a
yeah.
little bit about a university course that you're offering. So can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it just happens that the University of Victoria
Mm-hmm.
is has offered event modeling as part of the software design course.
Woohoo!
So computer science 375 at UVic is
Nice,
now going to be finishing up with event modeling to tie together
fantastic.
all the other parts during that course, such as UML and entity relationship diagrams, and some of the other patterns that they're teaching during that course,
Mm-hmm.
to be tied together with event modeling as the final lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be the guest lecturer there, hopefully every semester, which will be really
Yeah, that's
really nice. I
fantastic.
know
Yeah.
the professor there. Adam Murray is highly skilled,
Mm-hmm.
understands event sourcing, secure as, teaches that really well. Really excellent person,
Yeah.
well respected in the community.
Yeah.
So it was really flattering to be asked about that, and I'm happy that it's actually moving into academia now, and I'm hoping that it'll continue to precipitate down into lower numbered courses, to be more widely acceptable, and because it's really easy to understand. So I'm hoping that it's going to start to be introduced in other levels at colleges at level 100, and hopefully even in certain high schools,
Mm-hmm.
if it's actually doable there. I'd be super happy to help with that as well if anyone's interested.
Yeah, I
And
sure hope so.
yeah,
Yeah, and congratulations. This is fantastic. Yeah, this is really
yeah.
great.
So that's happening next month in
Oh,
November. So
nice.
we'll see how it
Coming up
goes.
pretty
Yeah.
soon. And you are working on a book. And how's that coming along?
Yes, that's also coming out in November in the draft, but actually officially will be released in January. So
Fantastic.
a lot of people have been asking for a lot of the material that we've been talking about, the
Yeah.
background to it, how these things work in practice,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about 23
Mm-hmm.
chapters at this point, and they're always ebbing and flowing. And I'm kind of glad I waited to write the book, finish the book actually,
Mm-hmm.
from all the notes that I have over the last few years. It'll just be a little bit meatier with more more substance to it, more case studies, more fun exercises, and give someone a lot of good reading material to really get a good base of just thinking
Mm-hmm.
differently about
Mm-hmm.
systems, because we've really had, we never mentioned how this whole thing started
Mm-hmm.
with the first 50 years of
Yeah.
computing being really static model of the current, why we're doing a lot of database
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It's, storage was really expensive. We didn't get into that. I do get into that in my in my blog
Yes.
post, and also the
Yeah,
book
yeah.
expand on it too. But there's a lot of reasons why this makes
Mm-hmm.
sense, and people are just going, well, why didn't people do that before? Well, it just wasn't in the cards. It was too
Yeah,
expensive to store information this
exactly.
way, and now we don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course we have, for those that speaking of November, wow, what else can we do there? November, we're gonna also have a really large
Workshop.
workshop
Yes.
that's 40 hours, 5 days
Woo.
long. It's around $1,200, but I think for the listeners to this podcast, we're going to have a maybe you can come up with a good discount code. What should it be?
Yeah, we'll come up with something and I'll add
Well, no,
it.
you can tell me one now. What should it be?
Oh, let's see.
we can make a thematic one. So
Hey, I can
okay,
try
so
that.
why don't we just do Axon? If you
Yeah,
put in
accent.
Axon, we'll just knock off 20%,
Perfect.
and just because the people got to the end, so
Hey,
let's
that's
keep it a secret.
fantastic. Yay.
Type in Axon in the discount code,
We'll do a
and
little
then you'll
teaser
get
in the
20% off.
in the
Yeah,
information of it.
I think it'll be fun. People deserve that discount if they
Absolutely.
made it this far. It's a long episode, right? So
This is perfect. Thank you for that. And also, I wanted to add that you do meetups regularly, and these are virtual meetups,
yes.
and I've attended several of them, and it really gives a good insight on what event modeling is all about, and you go into a lot more detail than what we managed to talk about today. So that's
Hmm.
something that is really really cool, and I recommend that also. Whoever's listening to really check out the meetups, and also you get to hear a lot of really cool questions also from the participants. The past few times that I
Yeah.
participated, some really really knowledgeable individuals are there,
Hmm.
and it's the amount of information that is exchanged is really wonderful. So highly
Yeah, lots
recommend
of
those as
regulars
well.
there that are dedicated to
Yeah,
it. So it's really good when regular people come back, and
absolutely.
it's an event. The name of the meetup is event driven. It is virtual now, so it's not just for
Yeah.
Vancouver. It's about 2,000 people there, and we meet every Tuesday and
Hmm.
Friday. So for Europe, that'll be your early evening,
Yes.
maybe I think it falls on 5 o'clock or 5:30 or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. And on the West Coast here, it's 10:30
Hmm.
a.m. Tuesdays and
Hmm.
Fridays. Sometimes I'm too busy, so sometimes it's once a week, but most of the time it's twice a
Yeah.
week. And we're always going in for around 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours,
Yeah.
depending on the topic. So
Exactly. And I'll
there's a
add the
lot of,
links as well, so that way
yeah,
everybody
there's
who's
a lot of
interested
links on
can
eventmodeling.org.
check it out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a lot
absolutely.
of, yeah, there's also all the, not all the recordings, but a lot of the recordings
Hmm.
from the meetup are on the YouTube
Perfect.
channel. You can check out previous
Yeah.
episodes, and lots of materials. So hopefully we'll get all the links and the show notes.
Absolutely.
And
And I'll add your
yeah.
YouTube as well, because you do have some webinars there as well that people can check out, and where you explaining the event model in slides, and there's visuals, so that people can also check that out because, of course, with the podcasts,
Yeah,
sometimes
I've been a little slow to publish the publish the meetup recordings simply because we're really busy trying to get
yeah,
this workshop
yeah,
going. It's a lot of recordings to be
yeah,
done, so 40
absolutely.
hours of instruction is nothing
Oh, it's a lot.
easy, and so
Yeah.
but we're gonna get there.
And of
We
course,
started early. We're gonna get
And
there.
of course, last but not least, you did a talk for our conference, for the Axon conference
That's
3 weeks
right.
ago. And that is also, I believe, available on YouTube so that everybody can go and check it out. And it was a really, really comprehensive and just wonderful talk. So highly, highly recommend all of
Well,
the
thank you.
above information and resources for people to check out. Any last comments that you'd like to add? Anything that we didn't? I mean, I know there's a lot to cover still, but
Yeah, I'm available. Usually I'm on Twitter,
Mhm.
so I'm highly active on Twitter.
Yeah.
Sometimes on LinkedIn, I do more professional style. But if you want the raw ideas, it's on Twitter.
Yeah.
You can message me there, direct message me, and there's also a Slack channel for event modeling if you like, dedicated
Mhm.
to it and anything all around. We're also developing in partnership with Evidence Systems, ONote, which is an automated, sort of better than
Mhm.
Miro, one of these things that will. It's basically a whiteboard that'll give you that's built for event modeling, so it'll give you all of the
Nice.
rules implemented. So you can't attach a command directly to a read model and things like this.
Mhm.
And more so, you can generate code. So you can either
Nice.
use some of the pre-built things that are being added to generate code for your solution, or you can extend it through your own patterns that you have in your own
Yeah.
company. Plug those in as part of the template, and if you get really good at it, you can pretty much generate 80% of most of the
Code as
code
well.
that you're going to need, and just focus on the important parts.
How
So,
fantastic.
and
Yeah.
again, yeah, there'll be obviously templates
Sure.
for simple things such as logging in, registering. Those are
Mhm.
going to be things you can just drag and
Mhm.
drop
Mhm.
and interface through events, which makes it a lot
Yeah.
easier than the traditional ways of integrating
Yeah, that's
things.
awesome. And you know this, but just for the listeners, I'm actually writing a blog series on from event modeling to code. So from model to code is a blog series that I'm working on, and I know I've been bombing your email with lots of questions.
No, that's great.
I appreciate you helping me
Happy to
out.
help.
So that's hopefully coming out. The first one should come out sometime next
Yeah.
week. So that's another hopefully resource for to
That'll help a lot
take a look
because a
at.
lot of people need that kind of
Mhm.
transition from traditional. A lot of people just want to get guided by tests,
Yeah.
test driven to
Yes.
focus.
Mhm.
But if you look at an event model, just follow the arrows. That'll give you the same kind of minimalistic,
Yeah.
just code what you need, but at least you get all the places reserved so you're not,
Yes.
cracking open things if things that were finished, you're not opening up again.
Hmm.
That's going to save you a lot of time.
Definitely. Definitely. And I
I'm looking forward to that
Oh, thank
series
you.
then. Yeah.
Yes, soon, hopefully, they will come out, and yeah, hopefully, we'll be able to help some of the listeners or people who are interested in finding out a little bit more about event modeling and also translating it into code a bit more. So I'm excited about those. So thank you so much, Adam, for making the time. And I know it's almost midnight your time, so I really
Oh, it's
appreciate
okay.
your
Thank you
time.
so much for Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's a
It's
pleasure.
all good. Looking forward to hopefully catching up and in the future
Absolutely.
seeing how things go. And
Absolutely.
don't forget about the workshop.
Yeah.
And I can't wait for the blog.
Oh, thank you
So
so
thank
much.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Same here. Same here. I'm sure I'll talk to you more. And until then, have a great day.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed my talk with Adam. I will include all of the resources and the links in the information part of this podcast. Please join me next time as I will discuss topics of Saga and set validation. Until then, have a great time and happy coding.